Your narrator is lying to you, but are you letting them do it the right way? Are you confusing unreliable narration with bad characterization? Are you using your unreliable narrator as a cheap trick instead of a sophisticated literary device? Is your supposedly mysterious narrator about as subtle as a neon sign saying, "Don't trust me"? If any of this sounds familiar, let's fix that. If you're new here, my name is Brianna and I post writing videos every week on character development, world building, and other writing related things. I also make easy to use writing workbooks on my Etsy shop, so if you're interested, hit subscribe and follow me on Threads, Instagram, and TikTok. All links are in the description below. The unreliable narrator is one of the most sophisticated and challenging literary devices in fiction writing. When done well, it creates layers of meaning, keeps readers engaged, and delivers devastating emotional impact. When done poorly, it confuses readers, feels manipulative, and destroys trust in your storytelling. Today we're diving into the 6 biggest mistakes new writers typically make with unreliable narrators and how to avoid them. But before we jump into the mistakes, let's talk about what is an unreliable narrator. An unreliable narrator is a storyteller whose credibility is compromised. They either deliberately mislead readers, unconsciously distort the truth, or have limitations that affect their ability to tell an accurate story. Their perspective of events doesn't align with objective reality, whether they know it or not. Now, this isn't just someone who occasionally gets things wrong or has a strong opinion. An unreliable narrator fundamentally alters how we understand the story because their version of events can't be trusted. There are also different types of unreliable narrators. The deliberately deceptive one who lies on purpose, the naive one who misunderstands situations due to age or inexperience, the mentally unstable narrator whose perception of reality is distorted, and the self-serving narrator who twists events to make themselves look better. The magic happens in the gap between what the narrator tells us and what we as readers can figure out is actually happening. But creating that gap effectively is where most writers stumble. That said, let's break down the 6 biggest mistakes new writers typically make with unreliable narration. Mistake number 1, making your narrator obviously unreliable from page 1. And this is the most common error that I see. You might think that making your narrator obviously untrustworthy from the start creates intrigue, but it can actually destroy the entire effect. Strong unreliable narrators initially seem trustworthy because this lulls readers into investing in their version of events. Once you've built that foundation of trust, then you can take a sledgehammer to it. So let me show you what I mean using the same characters I've been using in the past few videos. Finn the Prince, Rowan the Rebel, Lyra the Dragon Tamer. So let's say Prince Finn is telling you the story of how he became allies with the rebellion. So instead of saying, "I'm probably not the most reliable person to tell this story. I have a terrible memory, but I'd be remiss if I didn't tell you about how I single-handedly saved the kingdom by joining the rebels." Try writing it as something like, "I still remember the day I first encountered Rowan and his rebels. I was helping a merchant who had been unfairly taxed. Hardly the kind of thing that would interest revolutionaries, but something about my genuine concern for the people must have impressed Rowan, because the next thing I knew, he was asking for my support in their cause." Now, this example and the rest of my examples are imperfect. I just quickly put them together for the sake of this video. But the second version better establishes Finn as humble and genuinely caring, enough to make us trust him. Only later might we discover through other characters' reactions or contradictory evidence that Finn's help was actually quite self-serving, or that his concern wasn't as genuine as he remembers, or that he's conveniently omitting how his own royal policies contributed to those unfair taxes in the first place. Mistake number 2, using unreliable narration as a gotcha twist. You might be tempted to save all the unreliability for a big reveal at the end. Surprise! Everything you just read was a lie. But this feels like a betrayal of the reader-writer contract and easily destroys everything good about your story. Plant seeds of doubt throughout your narrative. Let readers gradually realize something isn't quite right, rather than pulling the rug out from under them at the last minute. Not to say that pulling out the rug can't be done well, but it's usually not done well, and feels like a cheap cop-out. So instead of writing 200 pages where Lyra seems like a perfectly honest dragon tamer, and then suddenly revealing she's been lying about everything and is actually the villain, try showing small inconsistencies early on. Maybe Lyra mentions she's never been injured by a dragon, but later we see old burn scars on her arm that she quickly covers up. Maybe she claims dragons are naturally gentle creatures, but her dragon seems unusually aggressive toward everyone except her. Maybe other characters react to her with suspicion, but she doesn't mention feeling that from them. These little contradictions don't immediately scream unreliable narrator, but they create a nagging sense that something is off. By the time bigger reveals happen, attentive readers might even see them coming, which is much more satisfying than being blindsided. Mistake number 3, confusing unreliable narration with inconsistent characterization. And by that, I mean having your narrator contradict themselves or act unpredictably does not automatically make them unreliable. Random inconsistency isn't unreliability, it's just poor characterization. Unreliable narrators have specific reasons for their distortions. Their unreliability should serve the story and reveal something deeper about their character or the themes you're exploring. So instead of having the rebellion leader Rowan randomly change his personality or opinions from chapter to chapter without clear reason, and then calling him unreliable, try letting Rowan consistently portray himself as a reluctant leader who never wanted to lead the rebellion. He talks about how leadership was thrust upon him, how he wishes he could just live peacefully. But through his actions, the way he makes unilateral decisions, his enjoyment of followers hanging on his every word, his assumption that others should sacrifice for the cause while he stays safe, we begin to see that he actually enjoys the power and admiration. His unreliability stems from his inability to admit, even to himself, that he wants to be the hero of the story. And this kind of unreliability reveals character depth and creates dramatic irony, rather than just confusing readers. Mistake number 4, not understanding different types of unreliable narrators. Don't create an unreliable narrator without really understanding why they're unreliable. Otherwise, this leads to muddled storytelling and unclear motivations. Decide early on what type of unreliable narrator you're writing and stay consistent with that choice. Each type requires different techniques, serves different purposes, and ultimately dictates the way your story is told. For example, if Lyra is unreliable because she's been traumatized by dragons and represses those memories, her unreliability will manifest differently than if she's deliberately lying to cover up her involvement in dragon trafficking. The trauma-based unreliable narrator might have gaps in her memory, might unconsciously avoid certain topics, or might genuinely believe a sanitized version of events. Her unreliability would be revealed through emotional reactions that don't match her story, or through other characters referencing events she doesn't remember. Now, the deliberately deceptive narrator would be more calculating. Her lies would be carefully constructed, but she might slip up when she's emotional or stressed. Her unreliability would be revealed through contradictions in her story, or through evidence that directly contradicts her claims. Understanding the psychology behind your narrator's unreliability helps you craft more believable and impactful distortions. Mistake number 5, failing to provide subtle clues for readers. Some writers make their unreliable narrator so convincing that even readers can't detect the unreliability until it's explicitly revealed. This misses the point of the narrative device completely. Try to hide clues in plain sight. The best unreliable narrators give attentive readers the tools to figure out what's really happening, while still maintaining the illusion for less careful readers. Let's go back to Prince Finn's story about joining the rebellion. Instead of making Finn's story completely believable with no contradictory evidence until the big reveal, try including subtle clues that don't immediately register as problematic. Maybe Finn mentions that everyone was surprised by his decision to help the rebels, which on his end could seem like modesty, but might suggest that it was more controversial than he admits. Maybe he describes a conversation with Rowan where Rowan seems unusually cautious or suspicious, which might indicate that their alliance isn't as natural as Finn believes. Or maybe Finn glosses over certain time periods or changes the subject when questions about his royal duties come up. These clues should feel natural in the moment, but gain new meaning once Finn's unreliability is exposed. And mistake number 6, making your unreliable narrator completely unsympathetic. Making your narrator obviously awful doesn't always make the unreliability more interesting. If readers don't care about your narrator at all, they might not engage with your story enough for the unreliability to matter. Remember that even unreliable narrators need to be compelling. They can be flawed, they can do bad things, but readers need to have a reason to keep reading their story. Instead of making Rowan an obviously terrible person from the start, cruel, stupid, completely self-absorbed, and expecting readers to care about his rebellion, try making Rowan genuinely charismatic or seemingly principled, even as his unreliability reveals deeper flaws. Maybe he truly believes he's fighting for justice and freedom. Maybe his distortions come from genuine trauma inflicted by the ruling class or impossible moral choices. Maybe he's insightful and inspiring about the cause, but blind to his own motivations. The goal is to create a narrator readers are invested in even as they begin to question their version of events. The most effective unreliable narrators make us complicit in their self-deception because we want to believe them. Now, you might think that unreliable narrators only work in first person, but that's not necessarily the case. You can absolutely create an unreliable narrator in third person. In third person limited, you're filtering everything through one character's perspective. Just like first person, but they're using pronouns like he, she, or they instead of I. But the unreliability comes from the same source. That character's biased, limited, or distorted view of events. So this narrative perspective works especially well to create dramatic irony, where readers understand something the character doesn't, and the third person narration can feel more authoritative as well, which can make the eventual revelation of their unreliability even more powerful. You can also use multiple third-person viewpoints to reveal different aspects of unreliability to show how different characters interpret the same events in completely different ways, or to underscore how one character is unreliable compared to the others. So there you have it. I hope this video helped you. If you're interested in unreliable narration but aren't sure which perspective to write in, check out my playlist which has videos on writing in first person and third person limited, multiple, and omniscient. And if you're looking for affordable writing workbooks that don't compromise your creative freedom, check out my Etsy shop linked in the description below. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next chapter.